Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book, I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stefanie Michele, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Steph. You sounded very deep then.
Hey, Sarah. Okay, fine.
How you doing? No, leave it. I mean, the end's a shambles. We might as well make the beginning one as well.
Let's make our intros as awkward as our outros.
Okay. Well, they already are. We just have to let them see it. hear it, not see it. Well, they might see it on YouTube.
Okay, but today we're talking about the feeling of not dieting meaning that you're letting yourself go and what that means. And I think that's going to be an interesting part of this conversation is talking about what that actually means, because there's definitely a negative connotation to the phrase and the concept of letting yourself go. This was a request from a listener, and it's also something that shows up so much in messages and queries and emails around, this is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of that I'm going to stop dieting, and that's really what I want to do. It sounds like a great life, but I'm afraid of letting myself go, and how to navigate that feeling as you kind of that tear between I want to live a life for me and I don't want to be perceived as something. So yeah, how do you think of it? The phrase itself, letting yourself go.
Well, have you ever seen those posts on social media? I've seen a few versions of it where it will be something like, oh, if I stop dieting, I'm letting myself go. And the next slide is something along the lines of, yes, you are letting go. You're letting go of society's expectations, and you're letting go of beating yourself up, and you're letting go all these things that you're letting go of. Mm-hmm. How do you feel when you see those posts? Do you like them? Are they a bit cheesy?
Oh, a lot of it's cheesy.
It's the social media.
I mean, I think it's just delivery. I think we need to differentiate between the concept of it and the literal meaning of it. So the idea of letting yourself go means what? It means like there's an idea that this means we are lazy, frumpy, that we lack discipline, and that we have no structure or order to our lives. We're just like some floating mass now. Like there's this idea of, oh, you just gave up on yourself. But I think that that's all very tied up in cultural ideals, and that now because you no longer care about your appearance, that you're just a cliche of gluttony and lack of self-respect. I think there's like an association of these things. And I do believe that the truth of it, when you actually think about the words like letting yourself go, it's an interesting pairing. It's an interesting association of why that term even became a thing, because letting yourself go feels free. And I think that the actual experience of that feels freer, because that's actually how I did experience it. I felt like I was finally like releasing myself of the expectations that had been built for me. So I was letting myself off that hook, but it didn't translate into anything akin to the social implications of what that would mean. And I think I think we just need to call this something different. I think that we need to understand that the term letting yourself go means something else. It means something that's just the bow it's wrapped up in, but it means something else. And is that what we're asking? Is that what we're saying? Is that what people are afraid of, that they're going to become lazy and gluttonous and not care and have no self-respect anymore? Is that the lie that has been sold? Or are you actually afraid of letting yourself go for other reasons? Like, do you feel like that means that you will have no structure or boundaries and that you will just have no sense of order in your life?
Mm-hmm. I think the concept comes from this baseline assumption that there's this moral obligation to keep working on ourselves. And if we're not working on ourselves and trying to be better all the time, then that means we will descend into our true selves, which is all those things you say, slovenly and just not good enough. It doesn't embrace the idea. In fact, it probably rejects the idea of inherent worthiness.
Yeah.
And a phrase has just popped into my head, and I have to start remembering where I hear this stuff, because I just sound like I'm plagiarizing all the time. It didn't come from me, but it was along the lines of all those things that we do, all these strategies that we develop to make ourselves more loved by others. is normally the things that people love us in spite of. Does that make sense? Well, the example, if we use sort of food and this pursuit of a body that looks perfect by society's ideals, if you spend all your time and your energy pursuing that, chances are the people in your life that love you and care about you love you in spite of your obsession with this stuff, not because of it.
Yeah.
But you've got this obsession because you're trying to make yourself more lovable to others. And in these things that we do to try hard to protect others and ourselves from this inherent unlovability that we all, or many of us, feel that we have, it doesn't work. It has the opposite effect of what we're actually trying to do.
Okay. So the ability to be loved and the people closest to you who might love you in spite of that is different than the approval of the masses who love you because of that, or who validate you because of that. And it's like, which one are you really after? And I think the letting yourself go is appealing to the masses. I think it's not really about what the people closer to you and the true feelings of love and worth that we may be after. I think this speaks to what will people, those vague, abstract people think of me if I let myself go, if I don't present well. And there is truth in that idea, because there is a cultural expectation that you appear a certain way in order to communicate to the world that you take care of yourself, because that is a moral obligation, and that you're running this race alongside everyone else who's also running this race and using it to bolster their own identities. And if you don't do that, then you are not playing like that. That's not okay. I think that the letting yourself go is about how you present to the world and the hierarchy and the validation you receive based on that hierarchy that we've established out there.
Well, I'm wondering now about all the people in the middle. So you've got those that love you. You've got the masses that don't know you. They just see the outside. And then you've got all the people in between, acquaintances, maybe some friends, people that you come into contact with, colleagues. Where are we placing them in this? Because to me, okay, I use the word lovability, but even likability, I don't know that people like someone more. If I think about back in work situations, people who perhaps I've worked with that have been loudly in pursuit of taking care of their bodies in that way, people tended to find them a bit insufferable.
Yes, but that could be a bias of you and I, because I feel like there are definitely people who envy and applaud and run the race, and I might like them in spite of it. But I think there's a significant amount of the culture that envies it and treats you better because of it and puts you on a pedestal. And that group of people seems to be, there's a pull for that. Especially I see this in corporate circles where there's a value system around being put together, being dressed well, having great hair, being on trend, being thin, being fit, going to the gym a certain number of times a week. Like, this is all what you do to present to colleagues as like you have it together. You're a leader. You are someone who can be trusted, and this is applauded and this is respected. Likability isn't part of it. I think it's more admirability that this is calling into question. This idea that if you stop presenting and you stop the pursuit of presenting, while you may be more likable, you're not going to be seen as the qualities that one would expect out of a leader.
So then does that mean that giving up the dieting and giving up the race, in your words, is to give up the chase of being admirable, of giving up chasing admiration
and respect?
Is that what we're giving up?
I think that's the idea. I think there's a certain amount of respect you get when you run that race, at least when you try. And that letting yourself go is saying that you're willing to be seen as something other than that, even if you don't believe it yourself. So I have clients who understand in their own person that what they're doing isn't giving up on themselves, and that there's something inherently liberating and free and self-nourishing about it. But they understand that but other people will not see it that way because there's a cultural norm. There's an accepted reality in which certain bodies means something. It's just a metaphor of these qualities. And it's like saying, I give up on the idea that I will be seen as that.
So it's interesting to me hearing you say this, because that's just not how I feel it.
Yeah.
Like, I hear it, and I'm not denying that that might not be true. But when anyone I hear making this sweeping statement about what everyone values, I don't know. And this idea that culture is somehow representative of what most people think. I don't know. I don't know. I'm
But I think it's the circles you run in. I think, not you, I just think this depends on your people. I think that there's definitely people and environments where this is the accepted. Maybe I wonder if it's American too versus. No, I don't think so. I
Probably
think it's
not.
business culture versus like helper culture.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? I'm really speaking because I've just seen it so much with clients who are in corporate America. It's a big problem. This is where I'm hearing it most. The letting, actually, it's not true. I think there's also a letting yourself go idea in mom culture. But I think that the culture matters. I think that the circles that believe this exist.
Culture does matter. We don't exist outside of our culture. So much of our identity gets built around it. I'm not of the mind where we can just go, oh, I'm just going to reject the culture and I'm going to make that a decision. And that's something that's easy or even possible to do. I think we can work at it, but I'm not sure that it's something that we'd ever get to a place where we don't care what the culture thinks. I'm not sure that we're designed that way. But I suppose now I'm just feeling a bit depressed about it. Just, where's the hope? No one's going to respect you or love you. Like,
no, I agree. It is disheartening for clients that I have that this is where they land. And it's kind of like, this is the reality. And I may not agree with it personally, but it is the cultural reality that I live in. And what do I do with that? And so to me, it's like, okay, well then this is where we have to develop a new template of identity inside of your body now, because I don't think that we have templates for the opposite of that. I don't think that we have how many people who live in larger bodies do you know who don't apologize for it? Like, how many role models do we have? At least I think now it's becoming more relevant, maybe in this little circle we're in. But usually it's like, I mean, I grew up in a time where if you were above a certain size, you apologized for it and you were on a diet working at it. And I think that we don't have a template for strong, successful people in bigger bodies that embody these traits. I think it's like you were taught to see it as one or another. And I think it's about realizing we can redefine this now. And you may have to lead the way, but you get to be all of these qualities that that are valuable to you inside of the body you're in, and you can carve that. You can be that person and you can lead the way there. Like, you get to trailblaze there. To me, that's the angle that I take with clients, like the empowerment angle of like, wait, we don't have to comply. We just redefine. And not that that's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go in and redefine. It's just that, it's this idea you take with you of like this whole thing of like, I'm letting myself go and now I just have to sit here in the corner now. No, you were letting yourself, you're releasing yourself of these expectations and these cultural norms, and you get to do this differently. You just get to do it in your body without apologizing anymore. It's just a different way of existing. And the energy you take with you when you embody that informs your culture and what your culture sees. And I think when we shrink and when we embody the feeling of I've let myself go and I'm hanging my head low, it just reinforces the concept to everyone else that like, yeah, you've let yourself go and now you're like a shrinking violet, instead of like, oh, her body has changed and she is still looking me in the eye and showing up and doing the same thing. She's still disciplined and motivated and all these things. Also, it's like this idea that you have to be disciplined and motivated and all these things too. You can't just like exist. But still, it's the energy you get to bring to this. I think it's just that we need to understand that, like, perhaps it's just that we don't have ideas of what that looks like because we've never been taught that these things can coexist, and we get to do that. That's an option.
This is making me think of values. many of our values are taught to us. We absorb the values of our family culture, we absorb the values of our wider culture. And quite often the work people come and do in therapy is about trying to dismantle these values that someone's been taught, and they're just not sitting right. Because when you are looking at them and bringing you into it now, I think you can look at those values and go, that's not what I want to value anymore. I have other values. It doesn't mean it vanishes, or the importance of those, because they're still there almost in your nervous system. And as you were speaking, I think I did, like, through my teenage years and early 20s, I did really value that admiration part of it. And I got it, and I enjoyed admiration. And I can remember saying to my therapist once, I trust admiration like more than love. Like, love seems to disappear, but admiration doesn't pretend to be anything more than what it is, fleeting. I mean, one of my more morose morose moments in therapy. But it all changed for me when I got ill. So when I got my brain tumor and I was really poorly for a couple of years, I went from being this incredibly social person that wanted to be doing stuff with different people all the time, organizing stuff. I didn't give myself any empty time, to then being ill and not wanting to be around people, but having my few select people that I did want to be around. And what that did is it forced a reevaluation of my values and what was important to me. So now when you talk about admiration, I think, no, that's not what I want anymore. What I want and what I value is connection. And admiration, you actually lose connection, because admiration means someone puts you on a pedestal.
Yes.
And I know we spoke about this earlier. Sometimes you and I will get a client approach us, and they put us up there on a pedestal as this person that all knowing and can fix them. And I kind of shudder a bit inside, because I'm like, oh gosh, I've got to try and get myself down off this pedestal, because this is not
Please get me down
up here. I don't like it. And when someone sends me a message and they'll say, you are fill in the blank, you are, like, some kind of compliment, like you're so amazing, or you're so this, or you're so that, that to me is just white noise. Like, I don't hear, like it means nothing to me.
Yes.
If someone says to me, your content has been so useful to me and I love that, I can hear that and I can accept that, because it's that one thing that I've done that really has impacted. But as soon as they think they know who or what I am and it's elevated, that to me now feels really unsafe.
I agree.
I don't crave that anymore at all. So for me, with connection, I want people to feel connected with me. So therefore the idea of pursuing, and this is probably what made it easier for me to let myself go, is because I don't want the admiration.
Yes.
I want connection.
Yes. Yes. You just like locked some pieces into place for me in terms of like how I've been trying to frame this. I was admired in like my younger years for appearance, and it felt so hollow as much as it felt great. Right. So like it felt so short-term, like uplifting, but over the long term felt empty. And when I talk about like the psychology, like that comes into play with all of this, I feel like there was a part of me that, and I've posted this, started to binge and gain weight there's so many reasons I did that, but like part of it I sometimes think was, I want to see who I am stripped of this false admiration. Like, who's around me when that's not relevant anymore? Like when I let myself go really on purpose, and who was left? And I think this was the point. I think there's a part of you that does recognize the difference between admiration and love, and starts to seek the true meaningful connection over the admiration. But the admiration can be so compelling when safety is equated to it, or when we have never. Sometimes I think like I needed to do that. I needed to fall from grace in order to like get my values, to reassert my values and what was important to me, and like start that path differently, because it's so easy to stay on the pedestal if you're already on it. You know what I mean? And then to feel like I cannot fall, because there's so much, everything at this point is built on me being here. I don't know myself off of it. And I don't know that I would be safe off of it. And I don't know that anyone would love me. I don't know if I'm not being admired, I don't know that I could be loved. And I'd rather just go with a sure thing.
I think for me, chasing admiration, there was a part of that was about avoiding intimacy. Because actually, if it's love that you're chasing, and particularly if you think you find it, and then that love is withdrawn, the pain of that compared to admiration being withdrawn, like admiration was just admiration anyway. It didn't have the same meaning. It didn't hold the same promise of what I felt that love held. That was a part of it for me in those days when I was much more seeking of that. It just felt safer, and also it felt that I could be more in control of what people saw. I don't know if that quite makes sense. That with the admiration, and avoiding vulnerability, I'm not really showing myself. So actually, if I get rejected by someone, they didn't really know me. Whereas if I open myself up and I love and allow myself to be loved, there's a vulnerability in that. But then if you're rejected, what does that mean? So I think sometimes we pursue, I know I have, and so maybe other people might relate to this, that pursuing of admiration. And like you say, it feels hollow as a way to try and feel that connection and love without the vulnerability, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, yes, but it's such an addictive loop. It's like, what keeps it there? I think a lot of people would agree with you and say there is a hollowness and that it doesn't work. But then why is it so hard to reject? Why does it take a brain tumor? Or
because the alternative is vulnerability.
Yeah.
You can't just reject the pursuit of admiration without embracing vulnerability, because then you're just alone and disconnected.
So is reframe, instead of, but I'm afraid to let myself go, I'm afraid to be vulnerable.
I can relate to that. I don't want to foist that upon anybody. Does it resonate with you?
Yeah. Yes, I think it's a shade of it. I don't think it's the whole story, but I think it's definitely a shade of it when it comes down to it. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to be minimized. I don't want to be marginalized. There's real threat there. But I think vulnerability is another piece of it. It's the more personal piece of it, because then you're vulnerable to what other people may think of you, but not necessarily how other people know you. So it is in a sense, I'm afraid of giving up admiration, but in so doing may invite more intimate connections, more meaningful connections, being truly seen, instead of seen for this facade that I've been able to pull off for quite a while.
I think there's another piece of it as well, which is that embracing the idea of enoughness. Because I was like, well, if I'm not going to pursue this version of myself, this is it. Is that going to be it? And that was, we've mentioned it a couple of times. We keep saying we'll do an episode on it, but that word humility comes to mind again. There's something very humbling about not chasing that position where you are hoping to get the admiration and respect and
inherent worth. This is hard. I think that it comes back to that too. Yeah, it's about your inherent worth. What is inherent worth? How do you locate that? What is your take on inherent worth? What makes a person inherently worthy?
One, it begins as a life philosophy for me. And a lot of people, I'll say to them, do you believe that people are inherently worthy just for being people? And they'll go, yes, I can get that as a philosophy. It doesn't make me feel like it, but that's a baseline presumption there that needs to be there before you can build upon that. Because if you only believe that other people are also worthy when they achieve those things,
right,
you're not going to be able, and you already don't feel worthy, you're never going to be able to get in touch with any sense of that.
What if you don't believe it? Well, what if people think, no, you have to earn it? I ask because I wrote about this once and realized the entire time that I assumed that was the belief And then I don't know if I published it or I thought about it later, and I was like, this is assuming, but what would somebody say if they didn't believe it? Because I know I did. I had somebody ask me, I had somebody come back and say, I don't believe that people are inherently worthy. I think that if you do nothing with your life, and I think that if you're just like sit in a room for your entire existence and don't contribute to society, I don't think you're worthy.
Worthy of what, though? If we look at it then from a basic human rights perspective, we say that everyone has these basic rights because everyone deserves basic rights of safety and protection, and all the laws and stuff that we have are because we believe that everybody is worth protecting as a society. It's there somewhere. This might come down to how we're defining worth. So what do we mean when we're saying that word worthy? I think there is a worthy of what?
Well, just that there's levels of worth, even like that's a thing, that like someone's more worthy. That is what it often comes down to, that someone's more worthy than someone else. And there's levels of access to that, whether that's rooted in your appearance or something else, that there is an idea that you have to earn your worth. And so if somebody feels that they do not meet their own personal definition of what makes a person worthy, that then they don't feel worthy and they can't access that feeling.
Mm-hmm. I sometimes feel like both these ends of the spectrums is this very ego-driven thing. The superior, like wanting to be superior, whatever, is quite ego-driven, but also the inferior part as well. It seeks an identity. It seeks to find a way to be of value, and that's normally through some kind of comparison to other people and what other people are doing. I think we go into the realms of who are we and what does it mean to be a human being?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff that we can wrap up in the next 10 minutes, I'm sure.
Yeah. I didn't call this. I didn't know this would go here. No. How do I get out? Maybe we'll do the middle ad, and when we come back, people will forget what we were talking about.
We hope you're enjoying this episode. If you want to connect with the show, we are Life After Diets podcast on YouTube and on Instagram. And if you want to email us, we are lifeafterdietspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to connect with me, Sarah, and find out more about my work and what I offer, I am the Binge Eating Therapist on YouTube and Instagram, and my website is also thebingeeatingtherapist.com.
And if you'd like to learn more about working one-to-one or in groups with me, Stefanie, you can find me at I am Stefanie Michele on Instagram and IamStefaniemichele.com. Now back to the episode.
The letting yourself go, there's two parts of that. It makes me think of Eckhart Tolle when he had that moment of awakening where he was like, I cannot stand myself any longer, and realized that there was the I and the myself, so two in there. There's the letting goer, and there is yourself that you're letting go of. When we talk about letting go generally, if we talk about letting go of diets in a kind of a positive way, letting go of something that's not serving us anymore is, in my mind, the way I think about that process is it is an act of surrender. It's saying, I can't do this anymore. This is not possible for me. That was the hardest part for me with this, was to go, it's actually not possible for me to pursue intentional weight loss without binge eating. I don't want that to be true. And over again, I kept trying to convince myself and proving to myself that that wasn't true. But letting go of that version of myself that I believed one day when they got it figured out was going to go down that route and then tell everybody else how to do it as well. To realize that wasn't true, to accept that wasn't true, meant letting go of something I had been clinging to for years. This idea of letting yourself go, the reframe that I would want to give it is this idea of something extremely positive. You are letting go of a part of you that is in pain, and that might bring some other discomfort and it might bring some other pain. Yeah. But you're choosing your pain now rather than the pain choosing you. And that's the bit I found much easier to bear. I've chosen this for myself. Yes, it's uncomfortable sometimes, but I choose this for myself because it's in alignment with what I value.
Right. It's a choosing of self, but not in that ego sense. I think it's a choosing of being over performing and doing and being attached to that ego performance, which I think we are mostly live in that space and to a degree have to as humans. But it's the deprioritization of the self that appears over the self that is and just exists and is allowed to be, which might be more in line with the value system of where you're at now. Because I think when I was younger, my value system was, I didn't even understand what that was like to be. Like it was just more like, I need to be something. I need to be, my ego needs to be. And then getting to this place of saying like, I reject this and I'm allowing myself to be, which relates back to the embodying of your values over cultural values. And it's deciding that those aren't mine anymore. Like I don't need to appear to you like I don't need to meet your criteria to know that I'm worthy. Like to know that I have a right to be here. I don't need to look a certain way in my clothes to feel like I'm a leader. I reject that idea. And I'm free to do that now. Not to say that there's not a repercussion you pay and like the culture still exists and there's consequences there, perhaps. The potential for them anyway, but it's the embodied experience of deciding that your worth is not going to be measured inside of you by other people's definitions of what make you worthy. And I think that's what the letting go for me feels like. It's like I release that whole baggage I don't need to carry that around.
You know, I love to talk about projection. I think what we're letting go of is there are certain qualities that society seems to applaud and approve of. And if you possess those, let's say it's a certain body type or whatever, that you're likely to have certain favorable projections made about you. But it's projections. And we go into this whole like what other people think. But what other people think about us is almost always a projection anyway, you know, unless they really know us. And even then there's going to be an element of they're seeing us through their frame of reference. So that whole, I know it's become a bit of a cliche, but that whole what people think of me is none of my business. I'm not too self-conscious about what other people think of me. I have moments when I am, and I have moments of vulnerability and moments of feeling it, but I feel like my baseline level is to come back to like it's okay. I want my opinion of me to be the most important thing. And for me, by actually letting myself go meant living more in alignment with what I valued and what I wanted to be important to me. And so I feel like this is a sense of, this is building something within ourselves and making our own opinion of ourselves the most important thing. Like the most important thing being, as Tom Bilyeu says, the most important thing being what you think about yourself when you're by yourself.
But what about when you're with others? What about what you think of yourself in the presence of others? And to what degree, I'm playing devil's advocate here, to what degree is what other people think of you important? Because I think it's I think it's against our evolutionary design to assume that what we think of ourselves is the only thing that matters, and that we can, as humans, discount the importance of what other people think of us just on a social level. I think that's how we are here.
Well, it's that elusive middle ground again, isn't it? That many of us black and white thinkers might struggle to find. But when I'm with people, particularly when I want to connect with people, what they think is important in terms of me wanting to connect. But if what they think of me is about disconnecting from me, then I'm going to withdraw from that, like emotionally withdraw from that contact, because that's not a safe place for me to be. I don't want to be around someone that's having those kinds of thoughts about me that's going to cause a disconnection. And that's always going to sting because I would prefer to connect. But connection is a two-way thing. We can't connect with people that don't want to connect with us. But I've depersonalized that a lot, because I see how most of the time people's thoughts are just influenced by their own frame of reference. You and I aren't going to see it. We can watch a film together and we'll come up with completely different conclusions about how good we thought that film was. It doesn't mean anything about the film. And so it's a bit similar. If we are consistently getting the same feedback from people about something, then maybe that's like, okay, what is this? And do I need to look at this? What might this thing be? And I think that's probably the challenge, because if you're living in a body that perhaps you are running into actual judgment from people on a regular basis, that I think is when it's challenging, compared to when it's here and there somebody not approving of you. It's almost like the more people that have the same thought about you, the more challenging it is compared to one person's opinion.
Right. Which is why in the case of body image, it's so difficult, because most of the culture believes this thing about body size. So it makes you feel they might be right. I think that's why it's easy to fall into that trap of feeling like we need to please the culture, because it feels awfully isolating to have everyone think this collective thing about, to make the projections. They're all making the same projections. Does that make it true? You know? I think that's why it's hard.
Yeah. Well, there's an assumption with the culture that because something is the culture likes and approves of, if you don't have it, then it's going to turn on you or something like that. Let's take money. You know, money is valued in our society. We live in a capitalist society. So money is often valued. But I don't really see people or notice people being judged for not having a lot of it. But maybe in some circles that does happen. And I think it's probably similar then maybe with the body image thing. We think, oh, this must happen everywhere I go. There's so many people that just don't give a fig what anyone else's body looks like, even though they might agree with a certain body type being ideal. Doesn't mean they have a strong feeling about your body not being that.
Yes, I think this is something, I think that's a concept that not everyone feels necessarily privy to. I didn't for a long time. I thought that the circles I ran in were the dominant way of thinking, and came to realize that I was in a narrow circle of people. Like it didn't have to be. And it speaks to our environment and the environment that we put ourselves in. We've talked about this. So if we are running in circles where we are consistently feeling like we are not worthy, and that the dominant thought in our environment and our immediate environments is in fact judging or valuing us less or considering us less worthy if we let ourselves go, it calls into question what our environment is and what environments in our lives are supportive to us and which ones are not. And not that that's an easy thing to get in and out of, but it calls it into question. And I think it's worth looking at, what is your environment? If you're always feeling this way, who are the people who admire you? Who are the people that love you? And how much of each are you exposed to daily, where you're inheriting a need to be admired, if that's 90% or more of where your value is being kind of like that's being reflected back to you. I think it can be as simple as that in terms of your environment being an influence of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, what we're exposed to. Just it's like family environments. We feel like that's the norm, and we go out and see other families behaving differently, and it's really confusing to us. So those messages, they go in and create our blueprint for the world. But well, I think I need a lie down after that. If you normally enjoy our podcast, even if this episode has left you a bit befuddled, please give us a nice rating. We need to start asking people to rate, because
it helps us reach more people to talk about things.
More people get to listen to this. So if you want more people to listen to riveting conversations like this one, please rate our show. And if you made it to the end as well, to this point here, thanks. We love you for staying with us, because I think we might have lost a few earlier. So thank you very much for listening.
We'll see you next week. Question mark?
Yeah. Okay, we don't lose all our subscribers after that one.